Danley here from the California Vintage Star Wars Collectors Club. We look forward to the Rancho Library Day every year. We're so bummed that we're not there in person, but we're so happy to be here virtually. So thanks again to Alan and crew for inviting us. And since we don't have our usual table full of fun vintage stuff, what we thought we'd do is just do a little virtual showcase. We've got a couple members that are going to share some things that really mean something to them. And to start off, since this is it's a library-powered event, I figured I'd start with some rare books. So what I have here are a trio of books that were published in Iceland. So back when the movie came out in 1978, the population in Iceland was only about 220,000, so not many of these were printed. So there's three here. So we've got the storybook, the pop-up book, and the novelization. And one of my favorite things about these books is the kind of weird way the Icelandic language works. So basically, when anything's translated in Icelandic, if it's a unique name or place or person, they're given their own new words in Icelandic. So, for example, Luke Skywalker, Logi Gemgengil, means flame spacewalker. Sometimes a little more literal. So Chewbacca is Lothin, which means hairy. And probably the best down here is Svartoftir, which is Darth Vader, which just means blackhead. And what makes these really, really special to me is that I'm actually half Icelandic. My mom was the first in her family to be born here in the United States, so to have something that's vintage in Star Wars that's tied back to my ancestry is really, really cool, and it means a lot to me. So anyway, hope you enjoy the rest of the showcase here, and we'll see you next year.
Hey kids, I'm Alex, I'm from Salinas, California, and Cantina happens to be my focus. 1978, Kenner in a rush jumps the gun, and we get a blue spacesuit, moon boots, flesh-toned figure. He is included in Kenner's first line of Cantina, available from Sears. 1979, Kenner realizes it's there and starts making red Snaggletooth. He's available on a card and in baggies. He's more like the film, yet still not really. The blue Snaggletooth, now deemed a lot more scarce. One of the harder to find figures, especially with shiny boots. Thanks, kids.
Hello, my name is Dwayne, and this is my son, Caden, and we're Star Wars fans. As you look around the room here, you can see that Caden and I like to collect a lot of different toys and memorabilia from the different Star Wars films. One of the things that we like to collect are Star Wars comic books. Here are some examples. In fact, here's an example of the very first issue of Star Wars that came out in 1977. Since then, we've collected a lot of different comic books over the years, and one of the things that we'd like to focus on in our collecting is foreign comic books. So here are some examples of some books from I've got books from England. I've got some issues from Italy, from Spain. Here's some from Greece, from Israel, Germany. Here's one from Finland, and even Yugoslavia. And here's one cool thing about the Yugoslavian Ewoks comic books is what, Caden?
In Yugoslavia, Ewoks are called Evoxies.
Evoxies. How cool is that? So several different countries got the license to do Star Wars comic books, but a few didn't. But that didn't stop some other countries from actually making their own comics. And we call them bootleg comic books or unlicensed comic books. And here are some examples of that. Here's an issue from Turkey. Here's an issue from Hungary. And several issues from China. One of the interesting thing about some of these bootleg versions is that there's some different nuances in the artistry of the comics. And also in the storylines themselves. For example, in the Chinese version of A New Hope, at the very end of the story, you can see the medal ceremony on Yavin. And there's Han and Luke getting their medal, but also Chewie. Chewie gets a medal at the end of this version. which is a better way to end the story, I think. Wouldn't you agree, Caden?
Hi, I'm Evan from Los Angeles. I'm a vintage Star Wars toy collector, and my main focus is the Canadian Empire Strikes Back Sears exclusive skin wraps. They only made 7 of these figures, and they came in the 7-packs and the 4-packs, and eventually sold separately, but only at Sears in 1980. And the very unique thing about these figures, other than being shrink wrapped, as opposed to in the plastic bubbles that Kenner made in the US and in other places around the world, was the names that were given to them. Instead of with Sensorscope, it was incorrectly given the name with Periscope for R2-D2. Lobot had correctly Lando's Aid underneath his name. Luke had the Hoth outfit, and instead of the Bespin outfit, Han Solo was given the Cloud City outfit. And the most famous one of all was General Veers, given the proper character name as opposed to the AT-AT Commander, which was sold everywhere else around the world. This was the only time and only place, for whatever reason they decided, to give the actual figure its character name, becoming one of the most sought out pieces in the collection. To get just one of these still in the skin wrap that is actually sealed is impressive. To get all 7 is a mighty feat that took me many years and many dedicated great friends. And what's really beautiful about these pieces is that they are just completely plain. They're not all fancy with amazing artwork. And the back of them, other than the Veers, Return of the Jedi transition stickers added, like the Akbar, they were just given these regular cardboard dotted backs. Yesterday's ugly ducklings are today's beauties and treasures, for sure. And an interesting note as well is that Han is the rarest one when you would think Veers is, because there are the fewest of them out there right now, and to get one that actually has the Han sticker covering the actual Dengar card, as you see here, I've only known 3 or 4 of them still in the actual skin wrap, sealed to show up. And that is my collection run of my 7 skin wraps from the Empire Strikes Back collection, only in Canada, only in Sears.
When I was a kid, I wasn't a great reader. It was difficult for me, and I really didn't enjoy it. But one day, I was in the mall with my parents, and we went to a Walden Books, and I found this book. This is the Jedi Master Quiz Book. It is full of Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back trivia. It was actually written by a 11-year-old from Florida named Rusty Miller. He compiled his list of questions and submitted them to Del Rey Books. Del Rey Books, in turn, talked to Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm talked to George Lucas, who absolutely loved the idea of a trivia book written by a kid. This book debuted on the New York Times bestsellers list in 1982. For about 6 months after I bought this book, I was inseparable from it. I carried it everywhere. I read this book cover to cover many, 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 many times. What kind of questions are in it? What was Luke's nickname? That'd be Wormy.
Hey Star Wars fans, my name is Darren. Today I'm going to share with you of one of my favorite pieces my father handed down to me as a kid, the 1978 Star Wars Darth Vader TIE Fighter. Amazingly enough, this TIE Fighter is still operational. I just popped in a fresh set of batteries and the LED still works. And the wings do come off. They pop off. And the cockpit still opens. And everyone knows, if you have this toy, it is difficult to raise the cockpit from the TIE Fighter pilot. The box is still in pretty good shape. With the 1978 kid. Well, thank you, Star Wars fans, for listening, and may the Force be with you.
Hey everybody, Mark Enright here from La Crescenta, California. Today I'm going to tell you about one of the earliest license holders for Star Wars,
Downpost Studios. They made masks, and as you can see in this early poster, they weren't even ready yet. They had to use images from the film. But a couple months later, once they got the masks made, they put them in the ads, and they were only $39.95 each. What a bargain, kids. Let's check them out. Now, here's a Stormtrooper. See these little holes drilled out? Later on, they said that's way too much work. Let's just slap a sticker on that mouth and call it a day. And then here's Vader. They made 7,000 of these in 1977, and once they improved the casting method in 1978, they sold 75,000 and still couldn't keep up with all the orders. Now here's the Chewbacca, originally sculpted with a very open, growling mouth, and Lucasfilm said he looked too mean, so they went for this more docile Wookiee look, and everyone was happy with that. Now here's C-3PO. They cast it in a vinyl material, luckily, because they found out later on that latex gets melted by gold paint. Oh my! And then we have this little catalog that came with the Darth Vader helmet. It has instructions like don't drive your car while you're wearing it, that kind of stuff. And it has an Armor All Protectant ad because it came with a little packet of Armor All that you would rub on the helmet, keep it nice and shiny for years to come. Well, that's it. Enjoy your Star Wars Reads Day. Hope you like my video. And may the Force be with you!
Hello everyone, my name's Darren and I live in Los Angeles. I hope you're having fun today learning about Star Wars collecting. What I wanted to do was tell a slightly different story for you today around this particular figure that you can see here. So this is Luke Skywalker, X-Wing pilot, and he's the figure in the orange that you can see. He was very easy to buy in the 80s in the US and in parts of Western Europe, but due to world events in operation at the time, he was impossible to buy in Eastern Europe, particularly in countries like Poland. So what did children who wanted to play Star Wars do in Poland in order to get their action figures? Well, that's the story that I want to tell you today. Now, before we get into that, remember the color of Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot because it's going to be important. Because the official figures were impossible to buy in Poland, manufacturers within the country took it upon themselves to create their own versions of the figure. Now, some figures were smuggled into the country and they made molds from the limbs of those figures and then made their best attempt to recreate other figures from that one original. And we can see here that this is the attempt of creating that Luke X-Wing pilot that I showed you. And you can see that the quality is not as good as the original one, but also the colors are very different. We have a dark brown, we have a blue, and we have a pink Luke X-Wing pilot. But can you remember what color the official figure was? That's right, he was orange. So if you were a child in Poland in the 1980s and you really wanted the authentic experience, but you couldn't get an orange-colored Luke X-Wing pilot, what did you do? Well, you bought one of these figures like I'm showing you here, and then you got creative, and you created your own in the correct color. And this is a figure from the 1980s that a child in Poland had colored in themselves in order to look like the official counterpart. So that is what children did when they couldn't get hold of the official figures. They created their own and still had exactly the same fun as everybody else playing Star Wars.
Hi, my name is David Carr, and I'm with my son Liam, the cameraman. Today we're going to talk about Star Wars books, in particular price guides and collectibles guides. I will show you my very first one. This one is from 1986, and it has tells you about different Star Wars collectibles, in particular action figures, which are always very popular. Here's one of my figures, Ben Obi-Wan Kenobi, at the time worth just $5 to $10. It's gone up a lot since then, but I'm going to show you some other guides here. These are more recent. As you'll notice, it has not only just domestic but foreign items, like from Mexico and other places. Here's one from 2008 that from friends of mine, other collectors, Duncan Jenkins and Gus Lopez. As you can tell, it's pretty massive. You go to more specialized books, such as the Star Wars Vintage Action Figures Guide for Collectors by John Kellerman. And here's my featured Obi-Wan Kenobi figure from the one I had growing up as a kid. You'll happen to notice too, here's a mug. This is also on the cover of the book that I mentioned earlier, and one of the action figures in the original packages. These books are great because they tell you not only the value of some of these items, but a lot about the history. And so we hope you get to explore those, learn some more about the history of Star Wars collectibles and all the different items that are out there made throughout the world. And we're glad to be able to share this with you today. Hope you have a wonderful day. May the Force be with you.
Hi, Brian Angel here, honored to appear on Rancho, Cucamonga Public Library's Star Wars Reads Day. And I'm here to talk about Topps trading cards and their place in Star Wars lore. And, you know, a trading card is a perfect item to collect, to carry on fanhood for a franchise with, because each little card is its own slice of the movie, its own little story to read, and its own little adventure for a young mind and a small hand. And these Topps trading cards have been an essential part of the Star Wars experience since 1977 when the original movie came out. And I've been collecting them ever since. Here's a wax pack from Series 1 and a couple of cards with my favorite droid, R5-D4. Some of the cards, as I mentioned, have their own little story. Other cards formed a puzzle, which was really fun for kids to collect and put together. And then some were just simply stickers that you can have all kinds of fun with, as we know as kids. And the cool thing about Topps trading cards is that they've been going from the original outset of Star Wars until current day. And even when there was no action figures or kind of big retail items being produced, even in those dark times, there were Star Wars cards being produced. These are from the early 90s. And then up until today, from the most recent piece of Star Wars, The Mandalorian, here's a trading card set that you could get at Target. Really proud of the collection that I've put together, which harkens back to my days of taking my bike with my brother down to the local liquor store, the grocery bag on Roscoe and Fallbrook in the famous San Fernando Valley. And I vividly remember my mom not wanting us to cross Roscoe because it was such a busy street. And we had the pretty babysitters in the neighborhood, Heidi and Denise, and whenever they would babysit, they would let us cross the busy street on our bikes. We could get our fix of Star Wars cards and candy at the liquor store. And what better way for a kid to experience life and Star Wars in the 70s. I've been Brian Angel, and honored to be here, as I mentioned. And hey, keep reading.
Hi, I'm Mark Huber, and I'm here to show you my favorite vintage Star Wars toy, the Imperial Troop Transporter. The great thing about the Imperial Troop Transporter, it was never featured in any movies. This is an original design by the folks at Kenner Toys, and allowed kids to come up with their own adventures with their action figures.
Kenner included a mini comic book which explained how the Empire used the Imperial Troop Transporter to take out the Jawa Sandcrawler on the planet of Tatooine.
And here I am on Christmas morning in 1980, actually receiving the Imperial Troop Transporter. My mom was especially proud of the moment because, one, I love the toy so much, but two, she actually got some money back when she sent in to get $3 back after we purchased some Stormtrooper figures.
And here's some cool 70s technology. There's a tiny record player in this toy. Whenever you press one of the red buttons, a sound will play from the original movie. Here's C-3PO. Here's his response. Here's the sound of a stormtrooper. Here's a stormtrooper's stun blaster. Sound of the troop transporter cannon. And the sound of the troop transporter speeding away.
Hi everybody, the artist Zailo here. In this video, we're going to talk about how to draw the Star Wars character IG11. First, we're going to talk about some basic shapes that we use to draw that character and how to draw those shapes. So get your paper and pencil and pens ready, because here we go. In this part of the video, we're going to talk about basic shapes. In this case, basic doesn't necessarily mean simple or easy, although that's the way people use the word sometimes. Basic actually means from the beginning, as in basic training, basic math. The beginning of something is the basis, is the base that you build upon. So we have our basic shapes, I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to draw a square. I think these are shapes that most everybody's going to know. And in this case, I'm going to do a rectangle. The problem is these are flat shapes. These are two-dimensional shapes. When you want to draw something that's not looking flat, that's more like real life, like 3D or three-dimensional, we have to turn it into something else. So instead of it just being a circle, I'm going to put a little shading on it. And I'm going to pretend it's got a shadow and turn it into a sphere or a ball or an orb. Instead of a square, we want to try to make it look like a box or a cube. Now in this case, I'm going to round this out a little bit because we're going to turn our rectangle into a cylinder in this case. Now these are called the basic shapes because they are the basis, they are the beginning of all other shapes. Any other shape that you can think of will come from these. I can take my sphere and I can kind of stretch it out into an egg shape if I wanted to. If I took it and I cut it in half and I put that top half on top of the Capitol building, we might call that the dome. If I took my cube and I actually chopped down the sides, leaving a point at the top, that might give us a pyramid. My cylinder is like a pencil or a pen that I'm using. When I get a brand new pencil, I need to be able to sharpen it to a point so that I can use it to draw. We call that a cone. So just as an example, all other shapes come from these three shapes. It's like the alphabet. If you were to say most words come from the alphabet, I'd say no, all words come from the alphabet. If it doesn't come from the alphabet, it's something, but it may not be a word. So in conclusion, we're going to be using shapes like this, and we're going to be modifying or changing them a little bit as we need to create our figure in the drawing. Now we're going to start our IG11 character. He's essentially, in my opinion, a collection of cylinders, a lot of different cylinders that have been modified and changed around a little bit. He's also got some bandoliers, and we give him a pistol and some other stuff. So we're going to start with the stuff that's kind of closest. Even his head is long and drawn out into kind of a funny shape. So he's got, let's start with this, just because that's going to be the part in front. And then he's got another one here. Change pins real quick. So they're a little different on each side, but not too bad. So I'm just going to put these in, get them kind of started. Here. Now, he's got kind of a squared off top part of his body, his chest area. His shoulder is really kind of a very short cylinder. His arm is definitely a cylinder, but he's got these little squeaky joints. That connect. His head kind of drops down into the chest a little bit, like his neck is pushed down into it. Now you got to be careful, his eye stalks kind of stick out. And we're going to draw those in a minute. His other shoulder is a little bit different. It's kind of a ball shape that's been had the bottom cut out of it so his arm can go into it. He has kind of these expandable joints here for his elbow, and a little bit on the wrist. Now his lower body comes down and wants to connect to the upper body. And then he's got these swivel joints that are really cylinders turned on their side for what would be a hip on a human. Kind of makes it seem like he can't turn his legs too much if you really look at it. We'll go back and draw his hand on this side. It's kind of a pincher hand, like you get in those games.
He does have coverings on the top part of his leg, which are really cylinders that have been kind of scalloped out. Then inside of that, you see his normal, I'll call it normal, leg. Drops down into the lower part of the leg. I'm going to do this here too. Kind of cuts away at an angle. And then he's got the inside where his true leg is. And this comes down into here. Then his ankles are, again, cylinders. They're kind of just flexible in one direction kind of ideas. His feet are kind of funny because they look like irons. They kind of look like they wouldn't do a whole lot except kind of hold him up, which could be good too. Let's do this hand. This hand is a little bit different than the other hand. He has a thumb and he has 2 fingers plus the thumb to hold up his weapon, or in this case, a blaster. It could be other things he might be holding on to. And we might come back and add some details to that in a little bit when we get going. So I'm going to switch pins again real quick. He has all kinds of kind of eyes coming out. I call them eyes as cylinders a little bit. Kind of protruding out of the front and the back. And he's always got this sort of encased area here. Now, he's also got lines that go across, like they're separated. And then he's also got some other, I'm assuming they're sensors or some kind of device that he can use. Put a little darkness in there since we're doing black and white. Switch pins. And then he's got lots of little details. You can put in whatever details you think he should have. Sometimes he's got specific little things going on here. And after we do that, then the fun part comes. You can come back, you can add color, you could take a different pen, you could add some shading, try to make him even look more three-dimensional, as if he's made up of cylinders as opposed to being flat. Same thing here on this one. And that's our character. Once you get done with that, then I like to make it a little simple. Give it a little uneven line. It doesn't have to be straight. Kind of low and behind them, and that's going to look like the ground. After you do that, put a little shading. Make it look like he's standing somewhere, wherever that is. And then you can put some rocks, pebbles, some little texture, some details. So now it doesn't look like he's floating on your page. He's kind of standing on the page somewhere. He's someplace. He's not just suspended in space on this page. I might come in and darken a few areas. Give it a little sense of being connected. I'm going to make this kind of a little heavier looking by adding some black spots, some heavy spots to it. And I think he has a wire that goes around and connects to something on one of his hands for some reason. I'm sure there's a reason. Okay. So I'm going to add a little bit more shading. You can add shading on any section you think it deserves. Anywhere you want to put it is fine. I'm just adding this a little bit to kind of give it a little more of a cylindrical as opposed to a flat shape looking, if I can. You can do it any way you want, and I've seen the images of him, this character. He looks like he's kind of scratched up. He's a little beat up. You could even come in and do some work on that. For example, randomly just kind of go across and do a crisscross. And go across, crisscross. A little scratchiness to it. He's gotten beat up over the years. He's fallen down. And a little texture here. Especially around the feet where it's going to run into rocks and stuff a lot. And once you're done with your work, I say this all the time to the students, what should you do? Sign it. Sign it and date it. I'm going to put the year. Hope you guys had fun. Hope you learned how to draw this character. I will see everybody soon. Be safe.